About that time. Okay. Okay, everyone, if you could kind of sit down and just make sure you silenced your phone or put it on airplane mode or something wonderful like that. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. Good evening.
This is wonderful. Wonderful turnout. So you know what I was like about coming here? It's not only just all of you having this wonderful get-together and great food, but also wondering what it's going to look like, because I think this is probably the fourth redecoration on the shop in what, a year, or is it a month? I'm not certain. Okay, we don't keep track, because Nick posted some pictures this morning, and I said, "Oh, that's not what it looks like." But it's great that you came out. I think this is our third or fourth. Well, it's our third presentation that we're recording. We're going over this. We have one that we didn't. So if you weren't here for the previous two, we did a really wonderful interview with Chris Bellardi over here on Frederick Santee and Sybil Leek. That's available. It's on YouTube. And of course, I did a presentation on the fundamentals or introduction to magic that you can listen to. And we're kind of following up on that. We're following up on that tonight with a talk about lucid dreaming. And we're going to expand into some other areas too. Lucid dreaming, astral projection, and if we have time, we'll touch on what's called the body of light and how that all fits into the spiritual practice and path. And it's always great to do a dreaming discussion sometime at this time of the year, because not only do we have that wonderful moon out there that's growing this weekend, but we're heading to Halloween with witches flying on broomsticks and psychedelics and all that. And of course, we enter into the long months of the year when we all just want to kind of curl up like a cat or a dog and just hibernate for a while. And some of us do that well. And just to kind of get ahead of ourselves, you'll be glad to know there is kind of like a hibernation practice. So we'll get into that for you. The thing about dream yoga is, and which is what I refer to it as, because that's what you hear it a lot as referred to, is that it's become very popular in the last probably 10 or 12 years. When I wrote my book, Between the Gates, Lucid Dreaming, Astral Projection, and the Body of Light in Western Esotericism, there wasn't a lot known about it. There were books out there, that's true. But the book I wrote, which we'll just call Between the Gates, was the first one to look at lucid dreaming in the context of the totality of spiritual practice, or at least practices within the various schools of Western esotericism. And I've been through quite a few and had some fairly significant responsibilities. And that being said, most of them would touch upon a topic, but it was not well integrated. So when I wrote that book, the idea was to show where it fit into the entire spectrum of teaching and practice. So lo and behold, I was quite thrilled to find out that what I had said in that book was identical to what I would later find out was within the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana. So that was very nice to find out. So what I'm referring to ever so slightly here with my own annotations is some of those notes as well, because I did receive direct instruction on those practices from the Nyingma tradition, which is the ancient or original school tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, from Lama Rinchen and a few others. And they were among the first to leave Tibet during the Chinese invasion. And I was very fortunate to get those teachings from him. And of course, at this one, it says I got them, well, almost 14 years ago to the date. So it's good timing. But with that said, I also have a tremendous amount of teachings and dream practices from different esoteric schools of Rosicrucianism, Kabbalah, alchemy. And more or less, they teach the same thing. Now, not always. There are some particular differences and unique differences in practice, but fundamentally, it's considered an advanced practice. I know we often don't like to hear that because we want to jump right into stuff and think, hey, well, I go to sleep anyhow, right? I'm going to dream anyhow. How can that be an advanced practice? Well, it's very simple. It has to do with understanding the nature of your own mind. Now, how many of you here have had a lucid dream? Okay, then I'll ask the reverse. How many of you here have never had a lucid dream? Now, you know what I'm talking about, right? A dream where you know you're dreaming. Okay? Okay. Well, we're going to help you fix that. Okay? Now, why would it be important for you to know that you're dreaming? Well, it simply means that you're awake within your own mind. Now, think about that. You are awake within your own mind. Because if you're not dreaming, well, what happens? You don't know until you woke up that you weren't dreaming. And if you are dreaming and you believe it, well, that's like playing a video game and thinking it's real. And yet, how often don't you play a video game, watch a movie, watch a show, and yet it has this tremendous emotional response or reaction on you, right? It pulls you right in. Because the mind is such a powerful tool that we often mistake it for who we are. So we need to understand our own mind because it's the function by which we process information. It's the tool by which we process information. Well, then what is we? We are consciousness. What are we aware of at this moment? And then what do I do with that awareness? So you see, dream practices are very important. It's said that when we go to sleep at night, we have a glimpse of death. That the process of sleeping or falling asleep is the same as the process of dying. Or similar to it, not the same, similar to it. In that the way the energies of the body and the mind reverse their flow and move back into the center of our heart. Because in classical schools, and this is across the board, the heart is considered the focal point of consciousness, not the brain. The brain is an organ of processing information, but it's not the focal point of consciousness. And then, of course, it's said that when we wake up in the morning, the reverse is true. Energies reverse themselves. So waking up is kind of like a little birth. I was going to call going to sleep the little death, but that's something else. And usually a lot more fun. But what we're seeing here is across the day a reenactment of the entire cycle of life and death. So we call this sleep practices advanced because they complement what we do during the day. And what we do during the day then complements or mirrors what we do during the night. So then what is it that we do during the day as a practice? Well, typically you would be engaged in some kind of meditative work, a practice of meditation. Now, what does meditation do? It helps us to get a glimpse of ourselves as we are. That's if it really works. That's, or should we say if we really work it. Getting there is the trick. Because we have to discipline our mind. Well, we have to discipline our body. Don't you love it? You sit down and meditate and suddenly everything itches. Everything scratches. Everything's too tight. Nothing's right. So we have to discipline the body. So we have practices to discipline the body. Then we have practices to discipline the mind. The most common of which are breathing practices, by the way. Slow, relaxed breathing. There's dozens of them that you can look up, but slow and regular breathing to calm the mind. Because you notice how the mind rides upon the breath. Okay. And then, of course, what we have to worry with our emotions or feelings. So you've all heard this in Sunday school back when you went. Thought, word, and deed. Okay, word is expression or emotion and action. Sometimes they call body, speech, and mind. Okay, and these are the three things we work with. These are the three tools, which also give us the gates inward. We call them the three gates. Okay. So you can have these gateways inward to your inner self through your body, through your speech and emotions and feelings, and through what? Through your thoughts or mind. And preferably when we get them all together, we have what they call an NLP congruity. When everything is, you have congruity, then boom, things just happen. They pop really well. When we don't have congruity, that's when we have what? Stress or friction, and things don't work out well for us. Now we know this is not rocket science, because you see this all the time. You know, when you're talking to someone and you're paying attention to their body language, or you're paying attention to their voice tone, so you naturally are aware of this notion of congruity, or are the energies, we'll call it matching. Okay? So with meditation, we come to understand the nature of our own mind. That is how we process information and why we perceive things the way we do. So what? So we can change it. So we can augment it. So we can not be dominated or ruled by it and perceive things in a manner that is more beneficial to us. Because what we may process it one way may be beneficial when we're 6, but that may not work out too well when we're 16 or when we're 30 or older. Because the mind has a habit of just wanting to reinforce itself, our self-perception and our self-ideas. And that's why we get into various practices. And these practices are designed to help us in a way break down our limited sense of self. But in another way we can say then to reconstruct it or rebuild it into a more expansive sense of self. What do you think you're really capable of? And then what do you feel you're really capable of? And then what do you act in terms of what you're capable of? You see, you notice there's often a gap between those. What we want to do is we want to get the actions to match the feelings and the feelings to match the thoughts. And we want those thoughts to be vast. We want them to be, as some say, as wide as the sky. We want them to be huge. So what are you really capable of? That's what the dream practice is helping you to come to understand. That's what daily meditation is helping you to truly understand. That you can overcome that itch. You can overcome that irritation. You can overcome that reactive element to want to go to road rage. Now, say you've been doing some meditation for a while, and you've been doing a really good job of it. And in your daily life, people think, wow, they've got it pretty well together, and you probably do. You may even think you've got it pretty well together, and you probably do. But the beautiful thing is, at night, we dream, and we can't hide from ourselves in our dreams. There we get to see who we really are and what we're really capable of. That's the beautiful part of it. So what we look for in dreams is challenges. It's a way of challenging ourselves on the kind of the speed path. We don't want to get ahead of that too much. So ultimately, dream practices are designed to help you anchor your realization of self and your changeability in your capacity to change yourself, but also the changeability of the world around you. Because all occult practices are based on the fundamental notion that nothing is fixed or permanent. As my great uncle used to say to me over and over again, the only thing permanent is change. So not only how do we deal with that change that's happening, but how do we manipulate it as well? Because if anything, what our occult practice is about, and I think we mentioned this in the last presentation, they're a way to overcome the limitations of time and space. Or it's really time-space. It's the same thing. We're trying to compress the time, right? Hurry things up. Why do we meditate and do these practices too? Well, we can compress the amount of time it takes to learn these lessons about ourselves. Theoretically, and I say this theoretically because I'm not necessarily sure of it, as one person said to me, he goes, and I think he did the math. I just don't remember exactly what it was. He goes, in 1 billion years, everyone gets enlightened. You just want to wait that long. Okay. So what can be helpful to us is an understanding that as we fall asleep at night, just on that edge of wakefulness and unwakefulness, when we don't really identify with anything in particular, we have an opportunity to have a glimpse of reality as it is. And it may last for a second or two, and then out you go. And your job is to recognize that and then to hold on to it. So some people can hold on to this ever so gently. And you've probably had an experience like that where your body is relaxed and asleep, or you think it is, but your mind is awake. And for a moment there, you're wonderfully relaxed. But then you realize you can't move, and you think this is like paralysis, you get night terrors, and all this stuff pops in. And suddenly your mind starts going, and it's gone. That moment is a glimpse. It also shows you how the mind reacts and how we need to slow that down so that we can get back to that relaxed state. Because if you stay in that, that's when you have an opportunity to do other things that we've talked about, what we call out-of-body experiences or astral projection or something like that. Everyone tells me that they want to astrally project. And I said, until they start it, and then they say, I feel like I'm going to die, so that's right.
Okay, but how do you overcome that part?
Practice.
Where it feels like everything's going to drop out.
Because it is.
And then you're like, oh shit, I got to start all over.
That's right.
That was really fucking scary, right?
Well, I jokingly said, I remember one experience. And it was so funny because, by the way, weather and seasonal stuff can affect this phenomenon, by the way. We'll talk a little bit about that. I feel myself kind of like going out, coming back, going out, coming back. I can feel my feet on the floor. Well, my feet should be on the floor. I'm laying on a bed. Why can I feel my feet on the floor, right? So it's like Gumby, Elastic Man, And just back and forth and back and forth and just get it over with already, So you'll have a lot of those experiences where it's just kind of wear yourself down, and that's okay. Other times I'll just just kind of raise up very gently. It all depends on what your practices are too, because all of those experiences first they're happening within your own psychic structure. Well, all of them are happening within your psychic structure. So this is where what the kind of meditative practices that you do are going to affect the time and experience and place of any kind of psychic out-of-body experience or dream practice that you do. So we're going to give you some stuff tonight to help you focus on what can be easily done. Easy and reliable. Okay? One thing I'd like to say is that these practices, these spiritual practices, often focus around what we talk about as a kind of initiatic experience. And we have to be careful there, not to confuse every psychic phenomena that we have with an initiation. An initiation is a glimpse of reality as it is. It's not just a spectacular experience or something new and different for you. It's a permanent shift or change in your awareness. And we have these in gradations or degrees. And the more you anchor yourself into the nighttime experience of lucid dreaming, and the easier these things are to experience. Now, they happen on their own. It's not something one necessarily forces. You can encourage it, but you can't force it. Okay? One of the things that's interesting is traditionally these practices are an advanced practice associated with what we call devotional or deity yogas, deity practices. Now, all of you are probably familiar with different occult practices where you do something known as assumption of the God form. Have you heard of that term?
Yes.
Yes. Have you heard of it? Yeah. Basically, it's great. It's giant make-believe. Okay?
Actors.
Yeah, that's right. It's all acting. You imagine your favorite deity, god or goddess, and then you imagine that you are them and they are you. Now, it's a little more complex than that, but that's the fundamentals of it, because if you can't do that, you can't do the rest of it. Okay? That's why in classical times, the role of theater in the temples, the mystery schools, was closely connected. Okay? Well, anyhow, we do this all the time, and we did it a lot as kids. You know, whether you're playing cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, fill in the blank. You were always pretending to be someone or something else. Your favorite superhero? Never. And in doing so, what happened? An aspect of you would come out that wasn't always present. And that's the purpose of it. You kind of feel like Batman for a moment. And then you realize you're not really Batman, and Batman's not real, and it kind of goes away. But then you get a little bit older. And instead of superheroes, you have celebrities as your stars. Often a celebrity, because that's who you know, if someone is famous. But it could also be someone you know, someone close to you, someone in your neighborhood, someone in your family. A role model. And then you start asking that wonderful question, oh, that bumper sticker. Excuse me. You know, what would Jesus do? That's really assumption of the God form. If I were so-and-so, what would I do? And you look at a lot of the folks who've done tremendous amount of work in their lives. Who was it? Was it Mike Tyson who idealized Muhammad Ali? And Muhammad Ali had someone who he hated. And I mean idealized. This wasn't just like, oh, I like them. This was, I want to be like this person in every way. This was their role model, literally. They modeled themselves after them. They shaped themselves after them. And where does that shaping take place? First, psychologically. So they reformatted their mind and their self-perceptions to be more like that. And that's what happens in assumption of the God form. That's what happens in deity yoga. So how many of you have a daily spiritual practice? Meditation? Very good. How many of you have like a saint or deity that you particularly have an affection for? Okay, good. Now if you don't worry. We'll figure something out. See, that's the nice thing about this. There's always a step 2 or plan B. You always have an option for you. But what's important is that you have an idea or an ideal about your potential, your possibility, okay? That's what we're talking about here. Overcoming your limited sense of self. That's what all this comes down to. Again, we suffer in life because we think things will never change. And we don't find ways to adapt to that change well. When we begin to understand that change is inevitable and we find ways to go with it, as well as to some degree shape it, that's when we can find some inner peace and happiness that was going to go with us beyond just the moment. Because ultimately this is not just about this life in the here, but it's about the hereafter. Because as I said, the experiences you had in your mind when you were asleep are going to repeat reflect or imitate to some degree the experiences you will have at the time and after death. That's why this is so important to us. So we have habits and patterns in the mind that we develop. We have meditation and self-reflection practices to examine them and change the ones that are no longer helpful and to reinforce ones that are good for us. They help us to see reality as it is, not as we would just like it to be. Remember, this is about understanding, which is about truth. And there is no my truth, your truth. There is truth, and then there is perception of truth. Okay? So there's only one truth. Everything else is a perception. And your goal is to get your perception to match reality as it is. The basic nature of our being is light. That's why we talk about illumination and natural clarity, natural light, to be filled with light. This should not be taken as just a metaphor. If we look at the works of Agrippa, Cornelius Agrippa, particularly his third book of occult philosophy, we see, which by the way is a foundational text of almost all Western magical practices. Okay. You see within that text references to the power of the light that fills beings. Now, he does give a kind of rudimentary introduction, might not be the word, but summary of some of the things I'm talking about here. Okay. But it is within the context of course, his time frame. So what he does is he doesn't speak as clearly as he'd like to and says so in the text itself. He says, we've given everything to you, we just haven't given it to you in order. Don't worry, we figured it out for you, so you're good. But the notion here is that people, and he gives historical figures who would glow with light. So we talk about auras, right? Seeing auras sometimes in the dark room. He would say sometimes it was so bright you would see it during the day. And he gives historical examples of that. But you see, because this light is not limited to an aspect. It's not just limited to a part of us. Because why? Because mind and consciousness fill every aspect of our body. So everything we do can be a mechanism to better understand ourselves. And therefore understand our energies. And then from those energies understand our responses to things. And as such understand our dreams. Because the dream is basically, it's kind of like a test. See, it's Halloween, right? Halloween's here, right? So you all like spooky stuff, right? Until you don't. Yeah, it's kind of like, I remember I was giving a presentation once to these wonderful folks. I don't know why they don't invite me back. They said something like, I don't believe in these angels or demons, invisible beings. I said, you know what, that's great. I'm glad you said that, because that way you're going to be the perfect way of showing us it's not true. Now come here. Now just do this ritual right here for us. And then there's the fear. Now, of course, we can examine to death why that hesitation appears. But the fact is, there's realities out there, and they are mirrored within us. And the realities within us are mirrored out there. That's why we have the ideas of what? Microcosm and macrocosm. When you're familiar with those terms, that means all the energies of the universe are in you. And you want to get it so that it mirrors all the energies out there. Because, the universe doesn't need saving. The world doesn't need saving. Okay. What needs saving is you saving your own sense of self-awareness from the limitations you've imposed upon it, to broaden it and to expand it, and with that, your potential, and express that. So that nature is basically clarity. That's why notice when you dream, how many of you dream in color? Yeah. How long did that take? Did it take a while? Always, yeah. Yeah. Did anyone dream in black and white? Still dream in black and white? Yeah. You often have to force that, by the way. You take, it can't happen naturally where you shift, but a lot of times I've known people who will never dream in color. Okay. Now, I have a theory about it. I'm not certain, but I pretty much believe that that's because they don't really do any kind of inner practice. So they're
Color dreaming?
So they're not really stoking their imagination. Your imagination is the key here, you see. Because the imagination is what you use in all these practices: meditation, visualization, ritual, right? This is what you use. So the more you can enhance your imaginative faculties, the more they're able to bridge and act as a focal point for all of these different things within you. Now, this is the fundamental basis of Renaissance magic. And this is what Giordano Bruno was talking about in some of his works, in which got him into a lot of trouble, because he was saying that the universe was infinite and that human capacity was therefore infinite within the framework of the use of the imagination. Because in the classical and the Renaissance period, the imagination was higher than the intellect. It was that which was right below your divine capacity. Right. Intellect was what you used to understand it, but imagination is what brought it into being. And isn't that what we do with, when you're told visualize your goal, right? Visualize something. You're bringing all your energies to bear. And when we say visualize, we don't simply mean imagery, although that's part of it. We also mean what? Feelings, right? Sensation, what? Sound, right? All of those things. So all of the sensory capacity that we have here is mirrored within us, and we bring that online within the framework of the imagination and meditation, and then we bring that online within the framework of what? Say it. Within what? Dreams. Okay. That's why you notice that your dream life becomes more concrete. Okay? Because you are literally developing what we call the dream body, for lack of a better term. Okay?
So do you want yourself to the point where you're dreaming in color?
It's nice if you do. It's very helpful. And then there's increased clarity, natural luminosity will occur. This natural luminosity that increases is a reflection of a greater integration, which we call initiation. And if we were to look at it from Kabbalah or alchemy, we would look at it in terms of as I spoke to you last time, with the spheres on the tree, as you get a greater capacity on those spheres, there's greater luminosity. That's why matter is called dark, but also why we say matter is what condensed light, and that the ultimate luminosity is so bright that it's blinding. And that's why we talk about people having the shock of light. They see it, that Saul on the road to Damascus moment, knocked on the horse and blind for 3 days. And things like that happen. I mean, not often, but I know people who've had them, where it's just the insight is too much. And people can have premature insights and they don't know how to process it. Mm-hmm. That's why it's always helpful to have a friend and guide. So the nature of the mind is clear light, and we're trying to get back to that. And how we do that, it's kind of like polishing our mirror. I mean, this is the nature of our mind right here. It's this crystal ball. It's crystal clear. And what we want to do, of course, is be able to see clearly in and through it. And what we do is we often, as we say, we're polishing that mirror to get what's off it. And that's what our practices do, these meditative practices and this dream work. Because the dream work will bring up some wonderful things, but it also bring up some embarrassing things and some atrocious things. And you have to be able to deal with that. I always wrote a couple articles a few months back on why nightmares are your friend. It's often we try to run away from them, but they can also be very beneficial. And why is that? Because we have energies within us. We call these psychic energies, and psychic channels. We call them often psychic centers. Some of you use the word chakras. And we have channels that go with them, and we have energies that go through them. So this is called channels and winds. And then we have what are known as drops, which are kind of a physiological component, which is interesting here because with that quasi-physiological component, it brings us to what we'll talk about later with spagyrics, where there's some things that you can use to help enhance this process in the reverse way. Now, not completely, but you can jumpstart it a little bit, okay? And that can be very beneficial to you, okay? So what we're doing is we're always looking to purify these channels. And what do I mean by purify them? Well, that's why we do relaxation. That's why we do deep breathing. That's why we focus on what we'll call more healthy and positive emotional responses to things. Because what they fundamentally do is they open us up. Quite literally open us up. You can feel it. Whereas, when you're angry or upset, you can literally feel the constriction or the closing down, right? Well, now think of this in the dream space. That's exactly what happens, but there's no physical body to prevent it. Everything happens like that. That's why you have to discipline your mind and understand these things so that you don't react to the experiences, but respond to them. You understand the difference. A reaction is a habituated pattern. A response is a choice. Because in the lucid dream, it's a choice. I have a friend of mine who was telling me he was studying with this Taoist guy, and of course he was Russian. So he had this kind of wonderful Russian personality mixed with Taoism. Boy, that must have been a treat. And they're doing this practice, and he comes back and he tells them what happened. He goes, so let me get this straight. You've traveled out, you've encountered someone, and your first response is to hit them with a shovel. Okay. Let's reconsider that. But you see, you encounter things in these dream spaces that aren't like you or I. So a fear response is quite typical and common. All of you have had nightmares, right? Sure. How many of you have had nightmares you couldn't wake up from? Yeah. That's what we call hell. But fortunately, you had a body, so you could eventually wake up or trigger a fear response, an adrenaline response in your body, and you pull you out of it. That's what they mean when they say a saint can make a heaven of hell, and a sinner can make a hell of heaven. It's not some, quaint little phrase. What it means is it's quite literally the mind's response to the environment that quite literally shifts the environment. We would even say shifts the frequency completely. But now you're doing this within your own mind and within your own self every night as you sleep. So, we want to understand the movement of these energies within ourselves because, when we're there, it's really like watching a movie. And this dream content or this movie content is out of all of the stored habits and patterns that we have across our life and maybe even many lives. So what we want to do is bring this into our practice. Bring it into our practice, of course, for greater realization. If we focus constantly on the notion of clarity, relaxation during the day, and looking at that clarity of light as we fall asleep at night, and how many of you noticed a kind of flicker of light when you close your eyes? Yeah. Kind of a white light. And it flickers like a lightning flash, we call it. And it's often low, but sometimes it can go from side to side, but often so. Don't look for it, but wait for it. It's like when you go deer hunting. You get up in the stand and you have to wait. When you go looking for a lot of things, you really don't look for them, right? You wait for them. But you have to be relaxed and clear in order to recognize it. It's the same thing as you're falling asleep. Kind of relax and wait for it. And if you can, hold on to it. And if you can't, don't worry about it. It'll come back later on during the night. Okay? Because at this time, as you're falling asleep and you're in that state, when your body is relaxed, maybe even when you're in that near hyper-traumatic night terror state of waiting for shadow people to visit you, which is just a projection of your own mind more likely than not, by the way. It could be other things, but probably not. At that wonderful state, that is the best time in order to enter into a dialogue with yourself. And that dialogue has to be short, crisp, and to the point, because this is what they always tell you. You've all read those books on, what, self-help and self-hypnosis. And what do they tell you? When is the best time to give yourself some positive suggestion? When you're falling asleep and when you're getting up. Why? Because that's when you're most clear. Your mind hasn't started racing yet. Reminding you of all the crappy stuff that you've put into it the day before. This is a time when you can rinse it out and change it. So this is why we often say your prayers first thing in the morning. Say your prayers at night before you go to sleep.
Mark, what would you call a phenomenon where, say, you, prior to sleep, you were internalizing an issue in life or a problem, and you wake in the morning with the answer?
Oh, that's wonderful. That's ideal, and that's what we want to do, and we want to do more of that. And that kind of inner revelation is something that we want to look forward to and encourage in all areas of our life. Because, again, there is an aspect of our awareness, a function of awareness, that allows us to become aware of many things. And that's what we were talking about earlier with the initiatic process. We can give it many different names. But with it, we can have access to a host of information and ideas that maybe in normal day-to-day consciousness we wouldn't be aware of or have access to. So we get into the domain of paranormal phenomena, mostly telepathy and clairvoyance, foreshadowing, foreseeing something, but also receipt of messages. So that kind of also leads us to the notion of prophetic dreams. Okay. So the important part of the meditation practice is memory. See, we have these experiences, but often people say, oh, I had a dream, but I don't remember it. I had to remember. How do I pull this over? How do I remember it? These are the phases we're going to go through. So as you're falling asleep, you have to be certain about what you want. And it's tonight, I will dream. Now you're going to probably dream anyhow, although some people say they don't, but you probably do. Now you know this, so this is a statement of fact. Tonight I will dream. I will become aware that I am dreaming. See, it's the stages. Many of you dream, many of you become aware that you're dreaming, and now it's the third stage, and you say this to yourself. And I will take control of my dreams. That capacity to take action in your dream is the important part of lucid dreaming. And then there's the fourth phase, or the fourth statement, which is, and I will become aware of the, we have different words for it, but the, we can say the clear light of reality, the luminous lumina, light of light, okay? Those types of things. But it has to be the underlying basis of reality. And I will do this. It's not a might, not a maybe, not a could. It's an affirmation, a statement of fact. Now, of course, What happens? It takes time. You got to train yourself, get your mind going along this line where it's going to cooperate, because for a long time it has not been cooperating because you've trained it not to cooperate. So now you got to train it to cooperate. But that's the fundamental basis. Tonight I will dream. Say it with me. Tonight I will dream.
Tonight I will dream.
I will know that I am dreaming.
I will know that I am dreaming.
I will take control of my dreams.
I will take control of my dreams.
And I will see the light of reality.
And I will see the light of reality.
Okay. And you hold that. Now, what you can also do now is you can add some visualization to this. Now, typically, those of you who said they don't remember their dreams well, raise your hands. You said you had to. Okay. Good. Okay. One of the practices that you often do is you visualize on the throat. Now, exact location is tricky, depends on the school of thought. Some actually move it further back to the medulla oblongata. Okay? That was the first school of thought that I got, was we would visualize back here. That works very well for clarity. I think it's because the throat is it's a metabolism regulator. So I think that probably has something to do with how it affects the communication.
And the medulla oblongata,
Yeah.
being your anger center, you're going to want to shut that down. So that makes sense too.
Yeah, I think too what happens is we tend to move it a little further up, and the visual and auditory centers are back there, so you kind of get the whole thing as a package.
Right.
That's what I said. I think we're kind of just getting the whole thing in there, but that's the idea. Okay, so you work with that. If you have the clarity of it is often a luminous red, okay, and warmth. So when you do this, if you say, I can't really focus on the color red, that's all right. Focus on the warmth. And what is warmth? The warmth is happy. It's joyful, okay? We refer to it even when we say joy, we use the words light, life, and love. And that's the old German manuscripts, the Rosicrucian manuscripts, light, life, and love. But when they say love, they really mean bliss, a joyfulness of bliss. Okay? Because it's almost non-directional. It's like omnidirectional rather than specific. And if you do that nightly over time, eventually you'll notice. Some people have great success very early on, by the way. One of the side effects is some people say that it keeps them awake. Don't worry about it. That's not your problem. Just let it go. Just practice it. Now, for those of you, how many of you have a particular deity that you like? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. And do you do a daily practice? Okay. Well, you're going to start. So what you do is, at this point, you visualize your deity. Or it could be a saint. It could be even a teacher. If you have a particular spiritual teacher that you're particularly fond of, who's been very beneficial to you. A friend of mine had a wonderful story about this. I'll tell you later. And if you don't, you can use a sphere of light, but it has to have a sense of sentience to it. Okay. You visualize this above your head. There's different directions. Some say about a foot, foot and a half. Others just 6 inches. Some say an arm's length. You find that space that's good. Because what happens now is it's luminous and almost like a rainbow in color. Now, when we say a rainbow, it would be as if you took one of those, like a crystal, and you were to shine light through it, and you would get the spectrum of color, okay? And you see this so clear and crisp. Now, even though the room is dark, you're imagining it clear and crisp. So you might even imagine the room filled with this light. And I want you to pay attention here because I want you to experiment a little bit, okay? Then you move this down into your heart. and you converse with the deity just as we said. You know, that you are the source of my devotion, my ideal. Assist me in this dream work. You can make up your own prayer. You don't need me to tell you. That's the saying, assist me here to recognize my dreams and to become aware of them and to control them and to, of course, see the nature of reality as it is. Always be careful of that last part. Always add it, and remember you'll get it. But be, you know. And then, generally speaking, the notion is to lay on your side when you sleep. I always thought this was interesting. Some schools are adamant about this. And they'll say, sleep on your right side, and they give a reason. Some say sleep on your left, and they give a reason too. I read an article a few months ago that said sleeping on your right side had certain physical benefits in terms of how things work. So lay on your right side. And see this total luminosity of light of this being shining out through your heart and through all your pores too, all your body, not just kind of like flashing out through the heart, but shining throughout all of you and filling the space. How far? That's always a question. Some will fill it up to about 30 feet. Now, this is what I want you to practice. I want you to experiment here. Because you will notice that if you can push this out further with greater clarity, the effects are going to be more pronounced. Okay. Now, typically, how big is a magic circle?
6 feet in each direction.
Okay, you're hurting me. You're hurting me. Typically, it's a
Are you talking about like a circle, like around yourself,
Like a
in the
ritual
dream
circle?
state, or are you talking about?
No, as a ritual circle,
I'd say
9 feet.
9 feet is the general instruction, 9 feet. But there is some question about that on some of the literature. Often we insist that it's 9 feet. So basically, if you were right here, you were a point on the ground, it would be 4.5 feet that way, 4.5 feet that way. Well, you can't really do much with that. And trust me, I've had ritual work given to me where I've been in a circle that's 3 feet. And someone said, well, why is that? It's because it compresses
condensed.
all the energy into like a pillar. And for that particular practice, you kind of need it. It's but anyhow, the notion is here that it really should be 9 feet in all directions.
Say 18.
All right, so now we have a much bigger circle practice. So when you do this, when you visualize this, you're visualizing essentially a sphere of luminous light. Okay? Essentially emanating out of the deity's heart in your heart. Pay close attention to that and repeat that after me. It is a sphere of light emanating out of the deity's heart in your heart. Okay? Because that is the point of which all the energies will compress as you fall asleep, and that is the point in which all the energies will compress at the time of death. Okay? And then if you do other practices which are far more advanced in terms of different types, we tend to think of astral projection of kind of going out, lying on the back and kind of going out. There's ones where you do forcible ejection through the top of your head. Okay. Yeah.
Just it's funny like how you said, like, picture that deity right here, whether it's 6 inches or a foot. When I was younger, as a child, I always had nightmares, and all those things like that. But it was more so a nightmare because I didn't understand what was going on when I was a child. Then there was a certain period of life where I stopped dreaming, which was the growing up phase, 8, 9, 10 years old. Then I was in what you can say the worst physical state of my life. That the only freedom I had was looking to go to sleep. During that time, lucid dreaming started. Within those dreams, things was happening that I knew that physically in this realm was impossible. It came to a point where I started looking towards these dreams more to as this is what I'm looking forward to in life as far as what's actually happening in real life time. Dreams stopped. About a good 10-year period. Within that 10-year period, the things that I knew that was impossible started becoming possible. Now we're here to where all those things that I said, nah, that can't happen. And it came to a point maybe about a year ago, and I told Nick this, throughout that whole time from a child to now, that unknown, unseen force that I felt, that I always knew was there, made itself present. And in that was an astral projection time, because what happened was I was laying down going to sleep, and I love that last little 5 minutes before you slip out. Best time ever. I have my TV on. I wake up, sit up in the bed. Okay, TV's how I left it. All right, screensaver's on. Boom, boom. And I went to go get up, like to use the bathroom. I turned around and I looked at myself and said, "Oh man," I said, "Look at you, man. You close your mouth, you sleep." But I knew that that was me. So as I'm looking at myself, my wife. I'm like, oh wow. I'm like, okay, I'm outside the box. That deity was standing by my door. I looked at my door. I said, oh, hey, what's up? And immediately I knew that that was that because the connection and the feeling was there. So I said, all right, hey, let's go. I followed it. And when I went out, when I walked out of my door, I was somewhere else. And I went probably all over the world, and I felt all the different calamities and emotions and everything. And when I awoke, all of that was still there. And I had a way better understanding of life and my emotions and everything. And it actually stuck. And me seeing it, I could draw it out exactly what it looked like. And like I said, just after that, I just knew that that's what it was. It was a confirmation. It was like, okay, hey, you're a big boy now. Now you know. And now we're here.
Mark, would you say that is him connecting with his HGA?
I don't give those titles because
I don't like it either, but I don't know what else.
I could because it's, the experience is, as long as the experience is beneficial. I don't put that in the framework of those names because it can be quite a few things. As long as it's beneficial.
And the crazy thing is, when I saw myself laying there, all the natural things as a human being that I would be worried about, oh, my family, oh, am I dying, what about my kids? None of that stuff was on the table. None of it was on the table. And it was kind of like just that reassurance, like, hey, it's just us. Let's focus on what's going on here. And like I said, afterwards, it was just a whole different outlook on life. Like when I came back, it was like, whoa, okay.
Well, and this is why we say that these experiences, these practices, create a feedback loop on what we do during the day and what we do at night. And that when we engage in this practice on a regular basis, and there's many different variations of it, this is a very simple one. It's very effective. There's no question about its effectiveness. Okay, it's just a matter of practicing and doing it. You have this then better understanding of what is going on within you, and this will arise and occur. But it's important that you pay attention to the slight precision that I've given you on the visualization, okay, for those reasons that I've just mentioned. Okay.
Excuse me,
What-
before you continue, when you say it could be a couple things, you mean ancestral, spiritual, interdimensional, celestial? When you had said his vision could be a couple things.
When we see things in these states, we often see a projection of ourselves as another. The question is that what it is? There's schools of thought that tend to be overly dogmatic. And there's a school of thought which will always project it as the other. It's always external to me. And then there's a school of thought which always says, no, it's always just a projection of your own mind. It's, you know. Well, the fact is, there has to be a harmony for that to happen. So there's got to be that harmony, so it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's beneficial. That's all that matters. So that's why I try to stay away from putting too many parameters on it, because unless we had a lot of time to go into it and a lot more data, all we know is it happened and it was good for you, and that's enough. So we often want to analyze our experiences, but we don't want to. We want to analyze them. We don't want to be stupid, but we don't want to overanalyze them either. Because what happens is they unfold over time, and that's the nature of often lucid dreams. When you have dreams at night, if they're particularly a teaching dream, and this is how you'll know, most of the dreams you have are nonsense. Ignore them. What you want to do is you want to get in the habit of writing them down, simply so that you can encourage the process of memory. But the only dreams that really matter are lucid dreams. The rest are just what they call karmic dreams, which means dreams that pop up out of your psyche, out of habits and frustrations, psychological and physical things. I'm sure you've all had that dream where you're cold and it turns out that your foot's hanging off the edge of the bed yeah, you've all been there. That's not a meaningful dream. Okay. There's no great symbolic spiritual teaching there, except maybe get a better blanket or get a dog. I don't know. So we want to pay attention to lucid dreams more or less only, but they're going to teach you in phases, and it may not be very quick. I was very impressed with the late great Dzogchen teacher Namkhai Norbu when he talked about revelation that took place over several years. I know quite a few people who, in other traditions, it took them decades for complete practices to be revealed to them. And just the way it was. So don't be in a hurry or a rush. The timeline of the inner dimensions is very, very different than the timeline of our world, and we have to be able to assimilate that. The more we work with it, the more we assimilate it, the more we assimilate it, the faster it'll happen. It really is a feedback loop. So how many of you are familiar with the practice known as the middle pillar? 1, 2, 3, who else? 4, okay. Take a look at that. Probably in my book, Child of the Sun. Take a look at that, and then you'll understand, have a better idea why we're placing so much emphasis on this heart center of the deity of you and why it matters. But we'll skip over that.
I have a question on the
Go ahead.
The vibrations in the middle pillar. And Israel Regardie and the Golden Dawn have specific names, and in some of your books you have the elemental names to vibrate. And I think I've seen from Israel Regardie that he does IAO for each sphere. Does it really matter what the word is, or is it just the fact that it's the vibration itself and the visualization of the light?
That system when originally put together was pretty simple, the original version. Regardie then, really, if you read his literature, did 2 or 3 different versions of the middle pillar. And the elemental one is really the most effective for most of the work that we're talking about. To answer your question too, if you just went with IAO, that would be a very good intonation just for this practice too. If you didn't, as you visualize the deity, IAO. The other sound is ah. And ah, it's a prominent ah. And there's more about that in the Mind of Hermes, the monograph Mind of Hermes. But this is enough to suffice to start. Now, Something that will happen as you do this is you're going to find that you will awake sometime around 3 or 4 in the morning. If that happens, this is extremely good. Take advantage of that. Even if
Drink lots of water.
yeah, take advantage of that, and go do some meditation. This is called the wisdom wind. Sometimes we call it the witching hour. But if you particularly wake up with incredible clarity of mind, just rest in that. Don't disturb it. Just rest in it. Everything will be clear. Just experience it. In the morning when you wake up, 2 schools of thought. One says then to let the deity rise up again above your head. I like that. That's okay. You can do that. Or another one is just to bring it down again. Take your pick, experiment, see what you like. I think people like symmetry, so the idea of it going back up is very useful. But now this is the important part. As you wake up, before you get out of bed, do not wake up quickly. Wake up slowly so that you don't disturb your energies. Rest and reflect upon whatever dreams you may have had. And now, assert to yourself that this day you will see everything as a dream. And will encounter everything as a dream, revealing to me the nature of reality. And I will address the day no matter what happens, to the best of my ability and with courage. So say that with me. When you wake up, visualize the deity rising above you and almost enveloping you in its light, overshadowing you like an umbrella. And what will you say? Today I will see everything as a dream. Revealing to me the nature of reality. I will do my best with whatever comes my way. And address it with courage. Very good. We're always looking at the internal and the external as reflections and interactions with one another, microcosm and macrocosm. That's what astrology is all about, by the way. And we're trying to, again, not erase the barrier, because there's no barrier to begin with. What we're trying to do is polish our mind to be more clear, our mirror of mind to perceive more accurately. Now, there is something that's very important here as we wish to encourage dream practices. There's a spectacular practice. I didn't really understand the name until recently. Someone told me about it because I learned it so long ago under a different name. They call it Nidra Yoga. And Nidra Yoga can be summarized in 2 paragraphs, so if you read one book on it, you read them all. But essentially, it's exactly what we described, so you can do this. You go home, and you lay down. Oh, isn't this great? A spiritual practice where you get to lay down. You mean I don't have to sit in some contorted posture? No, you do not. You can thank me for it later.
Shavasana.
You lay down. And now when we did this, I got to tell you, back in the day, it was an hour in this process. But you let the youngins do it in 15 minutes. You start with your left foot There are many ways to do this. One is to do just breathing and visualization, which I encourage you to do, and then relax it. And then you spiral around to the right foot. Some schools of thought like to go counterclockwise every time you start with the left. I'm in somewhat of an agreement with that. The notion here is kind of like the other image is like a mummy wrap. I think I described it in one thing. It's like wrapping a mummy. Okay. Now, there are some schools that will be very precise about everything as you visualize it up. You don't have to be. What matters is that you focus on the physical aspect of the body filled with light and relaxing. Again, relaxation is opening up. You're opening up the channels, not just the physical channels in terms of circulation and nervous system. You're opening up the channels in terms of the psychic channels. Okay? And you do this and you walk all the way up and you go inside and you pay close attention to everything and your pores too. The pores open up. Okay? Now if you haven't fallen asleep by this point, good. If you have fallen asleep, well then just enjoy it. But if you can get all the way up to the top of your head without falling asleep, you'll be close to that state that we talked about earlier, just as you are, where you can now, you want to do hypnotic inductions or affirmations or suggestions or visualizations, this is the time to do it. Because now, this is also the time when you can do visualizations of astral projection, problem solving, or just relaxing and waiting to see what happens. Now, my favorite one is just to relax and see what happens. And the reason being is, that's when you're going to get a real glimpse of what's all stored back here. And there's also some optical phenomena that will occur at some point, which I don't have time to go into, but that's in the one book I wrote, Mind of Hermes. There's some very particular optical phenomena that you'll experience inside your mind and brain that's very helpful to then focusing for more work. But the fact is, you have a practice which you can do as a progressive relaxation, but what's the key? The body relaxes, the mind stays awake and alert. Okay? What else? At some point, you may experience astral projection, out-of-body experiences, or to different dimensions. You may receive some valid instruction. You'll know it's valid because it works. If it doesn't work, it's not valid. So you have to be able to know how to make sense of your experiences. And that takes some teaching and guidance. We call this the night school. And there was a reference during the Renaissance. They said that, who is it? John Dee, of course, had a group of people who met at what they called the night school, which was a physical gathering of folks at night to study various matters, esoteric. But it's also this notion that one can, as they say, the witches fly together to the Sabbath. Well, maybe you won't be flying to a Sabbath, but maybe you'll be entering into at least some inner communication with that deity you've spent so much time with, or one of their retinue, or maybe someone else. And pay attention to what you may experience. Again, clarity is the thing. If it's in a lucid dream, it's good. If it's not, then maybe write it down, but don't put too much weight on it. But should you encounter anyone or anything, please don't hit them with a shovel. Please take the time to listen. The greatest problem of the mind is it wants to talk. It wants to run. Just listen. Listen to what's said. Because that's when we get into the phase that we talked about, knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel. In that Kabbalah, the first vision, the vision of Malkuth, is the vision of the guardian angel. But knowledge and conversation comes later. So first you need an introduction. It's often good to have an introduction before you ask for their hand in marriage. You know? Okay. That is our presentation for this evening. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them. Something that we do have is TJ has brought some of his spagyric products, and I'd like to say I've been fortunate enough to try them over the last few years, and they have a wonderful, wonderful taste to them, which is a good sign, and a wonderful effect. And I do believe you brought some Blue Lotus, which is particular for dreaming practice. Is that correct?
Yes, the realm of Yasa on the Tree of Life.
Yeah. So if you want to try something that can help maybe kickstart the process, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity tonight and grab some and maybe pull them aside and talk to them.
For those who can't remember their dreams, it's really great for dream recall. That's a huge one.
Now, there are vitamins you can take as well. I haven't paid too much attention to that because I've been old school for all this, mostly using spagyric products, not herbal, but spagyric, and there's a difference in how they're made. And TJ can explain that to you, and he does something else here.
It's just with the added mineral salts, it makes it more bioavailable to the body, helps penetrate the tissues a little more, lasts a little bit longer, rather than your traditional herbal tinctures, which go in and right out.
Right.
So,
Pretty much in and out.
it's essentially an ingestible talisman, and you're harnessing the virtues of particular planets into your being, into the microcosm.
If you have some mouse ear, that's a good one to take. If you have tea, but again, I use the teas when I run out of tincture.
Yeah.
Any questions, anyone?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
This question will be like a number of questions. So, lucid dreaming is a state where you have control with inside of your dreams, and astral projection is the state where we're literally getting on that astral plane. You had mentioned previous with inside of this session that you asked the question, how many people have been stuck inside a dream and can't get out? A few of us have raised your hands. So that's like your personal health in a sense. Okay. I have a nightly ritual that I do every night before I go to sleep. You were just kind of speaking on an exercise that you've done. You had said that usually it takes you about an hour. You start to almost envision a swirling. My ritual is kind of like that, but not like that. What I do is I always really start at my toes, work my way up, but I allow my body to dissipate.
Yeah.
I just allow it to go.
Right.
Okay. And I'm always able to get it to the head, to where I literally no longer have ocular eyes, but I have eyes within my mind. Okay. You and I had a conversation a while back. It was probably one of the first conversations we had, and I said, I always have a problem. I'll get myself to a certain specific spot within my mind, and it'll feel like everything's about to drop out from underneath me. Almost as if you're having that dream where you're falling off the entire state, right? And I'll wake up, like as in like everything that I just did just completely went to shit, and I don't want to waste another hour doing it, because I don't want to get to that state. Well, one of two things will happen to me during that. Okay, I'll either get to that point where things drop out and I'm like, the hell with that, I'm going to sleep for the night, or I will literally start to put myself into a state of sleep paralysis.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I get into those moments before I go into paralysis, I know I'm going into paralysis. Okay. However, when I go into those states of sleep paralysis, it's like violent to me. Okay, it's not like, I just wake up and I can't move, and maybe I'm seeing like a shadow.
Yeah, most people have a fear response because it's an unpleasant experience.
I don't feel like pain of an electrical current, but from my crown down my spine, I can feel and hear an electrical charge. And the moment that happens, the entire energy within inside of the room becomes pure panic. And then I know what's happening, so I almost feel as if I'm like lucid dreaming, because now I'm no longer in an awake world. I'm in an astral realm. I know what's about to happen. I'm trying to bring myself out of that before it happens. It's usually where I'm trying to move my fingers to wake my wife up so she can
Yeah.
get me the hell out of it.
Right.
Or I'll start telling myself inside, like, my deity is Santa Morte. I'll say, Santa Morte, wake me the fuck up. Santa Morte, wake me the fuck up. Sometimes I'll wake up, and sometimes I'll just be in that state for what feels like an eternity. It's probably only a couple of seconds, and then I'll come out of it. But by that time that I come out of it, my chest is like, what the fuck just happened? I know exactly what happened, but how do you overcome that? Because now, like, in my mind, like, I can't even decipher it. Was I astral projecting?
No.
Was I lucid dreaming?
No, you
was
weren't.
I paralysis?
You were in this, you were stuck essentially. Your body is asleep, your mind is awake, and you're able to perceive some of the, we'll call it the, for lack of a better term, the invisible mirror of reality around you in your room. But you weren't quite out. Normally what would have happened is you would have fallen asleep and skipped that phase.
Sure.
And then you would have had a moment where you dreamed, or maybe you would have just realized, oh, I'm asleep, and had the lucid dream state. Okay? That didn't happen. So you have to either fall asleep or simply not panic. And that not panicking part is so hardwired, literally hardwired into us physically, that can be very difficult.
Mm.
So the notion is, a practice like this allows you to fall asleep, because that's part of the natural process, that we'll call it the blackout process. And then you wake up within it. It's like going down and then coming up. The thing is, something you mentioned, and I want to make this clear to folks, most of what we experience at night isn't a dream state. It's within the subjective nature of our own mind. It is not taking place in what we call an astral dimension. And if you want to understand the difference, it's very simple. An astral dimension would have, again, clarity, but it's also would be a psychic objective dimension. So we experience this room, each one of us, subjectively, quite literally from our physical viewpoint and then our mental viewpoint. We all know this room is here. We can find this map on this room on Google, okay? It's the same way with these. There are other, we'll call them psychic dimensions, that have a, lack of a better term, a multi-dimensional reality to them, like this, okay? That's what we talk about when we talk about astral projection for real. So we have to make a clear distinction between what we'll call inner or purely subjective. And these subjective experiences are very good. Please understand, they're not, we want them because they help us to understand ourselves and to move towards these other ones. But you can have a kind of astral projection that's just limited to the physical dimension, where you get up and you walk across the room, where you stand up and you turn around. There's nothing terribly profound about it often. Mm-hmm. But it's important because it can shift our awareness, like, wow, that happened. There's something going on here, It's not a great philosophical moment, but it is a peeling the lid back.
Sure.
You're peeling and it makes you move in that direction now. Makes most people move in the direction of questioning it and trying to have it again because it's so unique in particular. So there are many types of, we'll talk astral dimensions, and some of these refer to what we call divine realms. Now these realms are what we seek to make a connection with in ritual magic when you're doing invocations of the spheres and energies. You're seeking to have a connection to that and to step by step bring some of that through. So that's why those rituals can provoke or can be used to trigger different altered states of consciousness.
chaos, the panic that Nick was just describing, isn't that one of our personal hell realms when we are facing our, facing the giants?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and we all have different ones, but it's the reason it's, we call it that is because it has to do with fundamental survival. Panic is a fight or flight mechanism, so we can point to it's an adrenal response. So from that, if you like, we can point to what psychic centers are being triggered. When you dream at night, we're asking you to start this practice focused on the heart because it's generally beneficial as a whole. There's a lot of connections that makes to a host of practices of day or night or other. But as you sleep at night, and as you go through phases of waking and sleeping, you can encounter different psychic centers being triggered, depending on the time of the day and the night as it goes through cycles. Some of that's probably astrological, but some of it has elemental qualities to it because the elemental cycles. But now we're getting into areas of metaphysical theory that really aren't that important to the work. What matters is that you do exactly as I told you as you fall asleep and as you wake, and you see and you integrate that into your daily practice.
So you were saying, you're talking about visuals. So usually right before I go to sleep, you close your eyes, and then I just imagine my body just melting away. And then I am completely relaxed and I close my eyes and I feel energy build up there. And it goes from blackness, you're talking about that flash of light. I'll see a little bit of the flash, then out of the black, I'll see like slowly coming into color, like different squiggles, different lines, and then they start to form an image. And then sometimes it'll be a place or a person or something else like that. I've been told I fall asleep in 5 seconds. Other people, it's like I hit the pillow and I'm out. But I remember most dreams I remember was 5, but I always remember these 2 dreams in color every single night. But I'm more curious about that visual thing that I see right before. Because I never not see that, just close my eyes, I'm unconscious. I always see that like slow blue mist almost kind of just starting to form into a picture, into a place. But then I feel like I'm physically there. Like I feel like that's not just an imagination. I feel like that is a scenery is real to me. Says, what is that?
Well, that's it. The scenery that we see can be as real as this room because it's a creation of our own mind. And it's always real as this room. It just depends on what we bring into it. I was interviewed a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, by Whitley Strieber, who wrote A Communion. Oh, yeah. And I was joking with him. I said, I sent him an email. I said, well, this is fascinating. I had an experience at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that was identical, and I had not read his book, to one of the experiences you described in communion. I said, what's most fascinating about it is, as it's occurring, I knew that it was a dream. And I said to him, I said, here's the interesting part though. I said, it was incredible, it was so real as it's happening. I said, wow. If I didn't have all these years of practice behind me, I would have swore this was really happening. But I know there's nothing above my attic. You see, there's always a giveaway. There's no room above my attic. Okay? So we have these little built-in glitches, if you will, that we can trigger and recognize. But the experiences, remember, because we're bringing, just as we have physical senses, well, what's the first thing we often encounter? Well, visual, because that's our most active. So in dreams, what do? It's mostly visual. And then as you practice more, maybe you get some auditory. And maybe some other sensory will come on. But this is a result of your kind of internalizing exterior experiences in an internal manner, invoking them into a reality through meditative and visualization practices, which is the foundation of all the contras. And then that comes online for you, and then you're able to bring that up in your interior space. So that's why these day-to-day practices are so important, because you're taking what you take, you're taking your day-to-day experience and you're bringing it up internally. You're taking your memory and your visualization and you're using it as a way of living inwardly, quite literally.
Mark, what if you're traveling every night, like to these psychic realms, and you're just like waking up exhausted every day? Like, what do you do with that? How do you regulate that?
Well,
Or am I supposed to regulate it? I mean, I call myself like a free flyer because I go to sleep and I go to these realms and I do these things with people that like I know in those realms, and then it's like not even profound. It's just like we're just doing things, and then I wake up and I'm just completely exhausted.
well, that's it. There's no reason to be exhausted.
Damien Eccles would say the same thing that she's saying right now
Yeah.
too, which is he said that's why he stopped.
There's no reason to be exhausted. Your body is asleep, so you should not be physically exhausted. What's happening is the exhaustion is either it's a construct. You're telling yourself you're exhausted because you should be, because you've done all these things, so you're not making a separation. Or there's too much, there is an actual energy exertion that's going on that should not be happening. So the idea is to look at your energy output during the day, first of all, and watch your speech, what you talk about, what you say, how often you talk, bring that under control. Because energy exhaustion is related to speech. Well, if you have any questions, you can grab me afterwards or email. I'll see if I can answer them. It was a wonderful night. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And it was lots of food, and I think 6 bottles of wine. By now, I think there's probably 3. So, oh, buy some books, buy some tinctures, and if you need a deity practice, look at this one, the Liturgy of Hermes. This will work for you, guaranteed. I mean that, guaranteed.